What's up guys, it's Enigma Hood, and today I'm going to do a video demonstrating that math is not a perfect model of reality. Now you might be wondering, well, so what? Why am I doing this? What's the point? Well, the point is because in theological arguments, a lot of times some ignorant theists will say stuff like, math proves that God exists. They will say that math is embedded in the fabric of reality itself, and that proves that God exists. Well, this is wrong for a couple of reasons. One, math is actually invented by people, and two, math is not a perfect model of reality, and I'm going to demonstrate that right now. So I'm a data analyst, and in one of the places that I worked at, I had to analyze data from two different databases. And in theory, the two databases are supposed to have identical information. In practice, however, they don't. So one of the things I had to do was I had to kind of communicate how different the numbers in the two databases are. I had to show this using spreadsheets and a little bit of mathematics. And I'm going to give you an example to show how mathematics can have its shortcomings. So let's say there's a company, and we'll call it Joe's Shit Shop. Joe's Shit Shop. Okay, so now we have database 1. We have, actually, you know what? I need to zoom in a little bit, don't I? Yeah, I should zoom in a bit. Okay, hopefully that's good enough. So we have database 1. We have database 2. Then we'll have another category, and we'll just call it diff, for difference. And then we'll have something called percent diff. So let's say the numbers for Joe's Shit Shop for the quarter we're dealing with. In database 1, we have $1 of revenue. And then in database 2, however, we have $2. So diff, let's just say, the thing is, what are we trying to communicate here? We are trying to communicate the difference in these two databases, right? So in theory, neither database is necessarily correct. We don't know which database is correct. We just want to say that they're different. But for the purposes of communicating ideas, we have to, assume one is kind of like the principal. So that means we have to take away something from the principal. So we'll have to just, for the sake of simplicity, we'll do D1 minus D2 for the diff, right? And then we get negative $1. Okay? So like I said before, neither one is necessarily correct, but we want to communicate how different they are. So that means we're going to have to take a percentage. We want to communicate in a percentage how different they are. So one way we can do that is we can take the diff and divide it by D1. So diff is going to be diff divided by D1. And we get negative 100%. Now, that by itself might not look bad, but watch what happens if we were to reverse these numbers. Let's say D1 is $2 and D2 is $1. Well, then the diff becomes positive $1 instead of negative $1. And then the percent diff, which is diff, this number, divided by D1, we get 50%. Now remember, we were just trying to communicate how different these two databases are. If we have $1 in database 1 and $2 in database 2, then the percent diff is negative 100%. But if we just swap the numbers, the percent diff becomes totally different. It becomes 50%. It's a completely different number. But the difference between the two is still just $1, right? It's just a matter of, like, the only reason why this one's negative is because D2 has a greater number than D1. But remember what I said before. Neither one is necessarily correct. We just want to communicate how different they are. But for the purposes of the calculation, we had to assume that D1 is the principal, so we have to subtract D2 from D1, just for the sake of it. And so we got a negative number here. And then we wound up with a percent diff that's drastically different than our second example here. Now you might be saying, well, why don't we just take the absolute value? And we could do that, but then it won't tell us which number is larger than the other, right? Intuitively, if we're just looking at the diffs and the percent diffs, if we take the absolute value, we're going to end up with a positive number here. And that's not going to tell us that D2 is in fact greater than D1, right? When we see a negative number here, we know that D2 is going to be greater than D1. So now the shortcoming, however, it tends to go away when the numbers become very large. Like, let's say we have 100,000 here, and then we have 90,000 in D2. So then the diff is going to be 10K. And the percent diff will be 10%. And then if we do the same thing and we reverse these numbers, 90K here, 100K here, diff is just negative 10K, we actually get negative 11%. So as we can see, as the numbers become larger, the error between these two numbers diminishes. Isn't that interesting? But the smaller the number is, the more drastic the difference is between the two numbers. So when we're trying to communicate something as simple as, well, what's the difference between these two databases? They're supposed to be the same number. But in this case, they're off by $1. And we have drastically different differences depending on which database has the higher value. And ironically enough, over here, when we have large differences, like by 10,000, the percent diff isn't really that much. You know, they're not very different from each other. Now, what is the point I'm making with all of this? I'm demonstrating a point that there are limitations to mathematics. They cannot accurately, with 100% certainty, model reality. In this case, when we're just trying to communicate something as simple as the difference between two databases, mathematics has a limitation. Now, in all fairness, luckily, the businesses that I analyzed aren't doing as badly as Joe's Shit Shop, where you only have, when they're only raking in like $1 or $2. When you get into these big numbers, you know, the percent diffs, you know, the margin of error is not too bad. It really isn't. But, you know, it does give you an idea that it isn't 100% accurate, you know? It's not the same. Mathematics is a model of reality, but it is not the same thing as reality. And mathematics is not woven into the fabric of the universe. Mathematics is a system that human beings created, and we created the rules of mathematics. Now, it turns out that in Excel, you can actually do an if statement, so that when you get like a negative number here, you could do an if statement so that you can get 50% over here if you wanted to. But then the problem with that is that now you're changing the rules of mathematics. No, it's no longer what we agree upon is the rules of mathematics. It's now something that you just kind of made up. You know, maybe you can tell your manager, well, you know, I had to do this for the sake of accuracy, because like when this number is negative, this number is going to be overrepresented. It's going to be higher than it should be. You know? But well, that's the sacrifice you have to make. if you want to use the rules of mathematics, or you have to make your own. So, whenever someone tells you that, oh, God invented mathematics, or he wove mathematics into the fabric of reality, you can safely tell them that they are full of shit. It clearly is not. This is Enigma Hud signing off.